Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you are watching this video lecture. In the earlier sessions, we discussed about the exemption related to house rent allowance, which is contained in section 10(13)(a), and also I asked you to do some questions related to computation of HRA exemption. Let us just quickly go through the answers to those questions. So first of all, what was asked in the question is to find out the taxable amount of house rent allowance. So we are not bothered about computation of total salary of any employee here. Only thing is we need to know the taxable amount of house rent allowance. For that, first of all, we should take what is the actual house rent allowance that is received by the employee. So in the first case, if you take it, it is 8,000 rupees per month. So naturally 96,000 rupees per annum is going to be the HRA actually received. HRA received is 96,000 rupees. From that we need to deduct exemption under section 10(13)(a). So how much HRA is received? Of course, heading will be there normally in the examination. Particulars amount, those are all common. So HRA received is 96,000. Exemption under section 10(30)(a). How much is that? We don't know, which we should calculate separately in the working notes. For that purpose, we need salary. So before calculating the exemption of HRA, first we should find out what is the amount of salary for the purpose of computation of exemption of HRA, which is nothing but basic plus DA, forming part of salary, plus commission as a percentage of turnover achieved by the employee. So if turnover is given as a fixed amount, always we can take that as if it would have been already calculated on the basis of turnover achieved by the employee. When we say commission on turnover, how can that be fixed amount? When the turnover changes, commission also changes. So safely we can assume this 1,000 rupees whatever is given definitely is already a calculated commission on the turnover that the employee has achieved. So what will be salary for this purpose? That is the first point we should calculate. Salary for the purpose of HRA, how much would be that? That will be first of all basic, that is 5,000 rupees per month, plus DA, forming part of salary. DA is actually 3,000 rupees per month, but 60% only is forming part of retirement benefits, means 1,800 only should be taken here, 60% of 3,000, plus commission on turnover 1,000 can be taken as part of salary, but these are all per month. So what we should do is we should multiply with 12 so that we can get per annum what is the salary for this purpose of computing the exemption of HRA, including basic plus DA, forming part of salary, plus commission on turnover. Only these three things. Bonus is given in the question. We should just ignore that. That should not be considered at all. So that is one unnecessary information. So identifying the appropriate necessary information is a very important aspect of solving questions in the income tax paper. Also identifying inappropriate information, unnecessary information also is equally important. So bonus is given here, but that doesn't make, that gives us no use for the purpose of computation of salary, since we are only calculating the exemption and taxable amount of HRA. Once we have the salary, then simply what we can do is we can find out lowest of the three things. What are those three things? First one is anyway actual HRA received. Second one and third one we need to calculate. So what is the second one? Rent paid minus 10% of salary. So we are directly calculating the second and third things. First one is already there, that is 96,000 rupees HRA received. But in the exam working notes, you have to write all the three. Actual HRA received 96,000. Rent paid minus 10% of salary. That is the second calculation. So what is the rent paid here? That is given in the question. 5,000 rupees per month. So 5,000 rupees per month means per annum 60,000 rupees. That is rent paid. Minus 10% of salary. Salary here already we calculated 93,600. So 10% of 93,600 will be naturally 9,360. So second calculation is 50,640. Then the third calculation is either 40% or 50% of salary. Here it should be 50% because the rent paid is in Kolkata. So whatever the salary we already calculated, multiply that with 50%. Half of that is the third calculation. Whichever is lower of these three things. So whatever is lower of these three things, that is 46,800. That will be taken as exemption of HRA. So naturally how much is going to be taxable? That is 49,200 is the final answer for this question. 49,200 is the taxable HRA. That's what we want. We don't want total salary. We don't want exemption of HRA. We want taxable amount of HRA. That is 49,200 in the first case. Like this, we can solve other questions also quickly. So let us quickly go through them. Question number 2. Once again, actual HRA received is 5,000 rupees per month. So that was the actual HRA received, 5,000 rupees per month. That means annually it is going to be 60,000 rupees. That is per annum. So 60,000 rupees is the actual HRA received per annum. Exemption is what we have to calculate. But for that purpose, we need salary first of all. What is salary? Once again, same. Basic plus basic 10,000 plus commission on turnover is given here. Let us take that also because it is assumed to be on the turnover as a percentage already computed, plus DA 3,000 per month, but only 40% forms part of retirement benefits. So we cannot take 3,000. We can take only 1,200 per month. So basic plus DA forming part of salary plus commission on turnover, all the three we have taken. But that is monthly which was given. Multiply with 12, we get 1,52,400 is the salary which is useless elsewhere. Only for the purpose of computation of exemption of HRA it is useful. That's all. That is 1,52,400. Then exemption of HRA depends upon actual HRA received or rent paid minus 10% of salary or 40% or 50% of salary, whichever is lower. But before that, identify one additional point here. Advance salary is given. This advance salary is once again useless information that is not going to be included in the salary here. Once again, I am repeating. When we are not including that here, that does not in any way mean it is not taxable. It would be taxable. It will be includable in the computation of income from salaries of the SSC, but we are not doing that. We are only calculating some salary as defined under section 1013A for the purpose of computation of exemption of HRA. That's all. That is very limited scope. This word salary what we have. So here this advance salary should not be included here. And always in this case, the salary should be calculated on due basis. For the purpose of computation of exemption of HRA, it should be calculated on due basis, not on receipt basis. So even though this 10,000 rupees is received, that should not be included in this salary. That is the first point to be noted here. So without including that, the salary came out to be 1,52,400. Then all that we need to do is rent paid minus 10% of salary. Rent paid is 5,000 per month, which means once again 60,000 rupees per annum minus 10% of salary will be 15,240. So that comes to 44,760. Then the third one is directly either 40% or 50%. We have to do 40% here because the house is in Kanpur. So 40% of salary, whichever is lower. So 60,000 or 44,760 or 60,960, which is lower. 44,760 is lower. So what is going to be the taxable HRA for this purpose? That is 15,240. That is the final answer for question number 2. Point to be noted here is advance salary should not be included for the purpose of calculation of this salary, which we are using only for the purpose of computation of exemption of HRA. That is the point. Remaining things are straightforward, simple. Like this, for the others also, let us quickly do the solutions. So again, HRA received in the question number 3 was 6,000 rupees per month, which means 72,000 rupees per annum. Exemption, how much is that, we don't know, but taxable will be remaining amount. Exemption, let us calculate. For that purpose, let us take salary first. Salary once again is same, basic plus DA, forming part of salary, plus commission as a percentage of turnover. Only those three, nothing else will be included. So here basic is 16,000 plus. Look at the dearness allowance. It is given that it is forming part of salary. So 6,000 should be taken, and dearness pay, whatever the name they call, we don't care. That is not forming part of salary. So definitely it should not be taken. And there is no commission on turnover here. We cannot search for it. If it is not there, not there. But since these are only monthly, annually the salary would be 2,64,000 rupees. So that is the salary for the purpose of computation of HRA. And here conveyance allowance is given. Once again, that should not be taken as part of salary here. It should not be taken. Only three things are there, means only three things. Whatever information available is unnecessary, that should not be included. So basic plus DA forming part of salary, only two are there here. Only two will take. So that is salary for the purpose of 1013A. Then once we have that, rent paid minus 10% of salary. Rent paid is how much? 4,000 per month means 48,000. Minus 10% of salary can be 26,400. So that is the second calculation. Anyway, HRA received already, we know that. And the third calculation is 40% or 50%. In this case, it is 40%. Why? Because the house is situated in Goa, not in any of the metros. So definitely, the third one is 1,05,600, which is a big one. Will not be useful to us, but we have to calculate and show. We cannot say in the exam, anyway it is very high amount, so I will not show that. Not like that. Working notes will have their own marks. But ultimately, what is the final computation? Whichever is lower of these three, so that will be 21,600, which is the lowest of all the three things. And then remaining will be naturally taxable. That comes to 50,400 rupees in the third case. That is taxable HRA, 50,400 rupees. Same like that, if we continue the calculations for other questions. Question number 4. Once again, HRA received is how much? 8,000 into 12, that is 96,000. That is HRA received. Exemption, we need to calculate that. What is the salary for this purpose? Here, basic is given 18,000 per month. Directly we have to take multiplied with 12. Why? Because dearness allowance was not forming part of salary, so it should not be included. And here the commission is given not on turnover, it is given on profit. Earlier cases the commission was on turnover. Commission on turnover should be taken into consideration for the purpose of calculating salary, whereas commission on profit should not be considered while calculating this salary. Hence, we have to ignore both of these items, commission on profit also, and dearness allowance, which is not forming part of salary also. Both should be ignored. Basic anyway has to be taken, that is coming to 2,16,000 rupees per annum. Then second one is rent paid minus 10% of salary. So rent paid is 1,20,000, 10,000 per month means 1,20,000 per annum, minus 10% of salary will be 21,600. That is going to be the second calculation, that is 98,400 rupees. Rent paid 1,20,000 minus 10% of salary 21,600. Then Third calculation, 40 or 50%. Because it is Chennai, we should take 50%. So half of this, 1,08,000. Whichever is lower, 96,000, 98,400 or 1,08,000. Now lower is 96,000 only. So naturally, what is taxable HRA? Nil. Nothing is taxable. Answer for question number 4 will be nil. Not taxable because the entire amount of HRA received is exempt according to the calculation done under section 1013A. That's it. That is question number 4. Then question number 5, same way, HRA received is 3,000 per month. That means 36,000 per annum. Salary for this purpose, calculate carefully. Basic is 12,000 per month. Basic is 12,000 per month. And here also commission on profit is given. Should we take it? No. And there is no DA anyway. So we should not take anything directly. 12,000 into 12 is salary here. Then the second point is rent paid minus 10% of salary. We don't care about tiffin allowance, project allowance here. Whatever the details extra which are given, those are not useful for the purpose of computation of exemption of HRA. They might be useful in calculating the total salary of that employee, which we are not doing now. So first of all, for this purpose, these are irrelevant. So what is salary here is 1,44,000. Then the second point is rent paid minus 10% of salary. So rent paid is given as 5,000 per month, which comes to 60,000 rupees per annum, minus 10% of salary is 14,400. That comes to 45,600. Whereas third calculation is 40% of salary. Don't give 50% just because Hyderabad was not there in that 4 cities. We cannot argue anything. Hyderabad is also a metro. Hyderabad is also big. Hyderabad is also costly. All those things do not matter. Law says 4 cities, only 4 cities 50%. Any place in India, only 40% of salary is the third calculation. Out of these 3 things, whichever is lower, once again HRA received is lower. So once again, taxable HRA here will be nil only. That is the way to calculate HRA exemption and accordingly the taxable HRA also. So the final answers are 49,200, 15,240, 50,400, nil and nil. Of course, these calculations should have been done properly. If any such question is given in the examination as a descriptive question, then you need to show the workings also. But these are anyway generally for practice. Directly questions like this will not appear in the examination. In a bigger question of 10 marks, this will be one small working notes. There we have to show all the calculations. We need to write the provisions related to 1013A. We need to write all the 3 things. One is actual HRA received, second one is rent paid minus 10% of salary, and the third one is 40 or 50% of salary according to the city given in the question. Then we have to take whichever is lower as exemption. That should be reduced from the actual HRA received. That gives us taxable HRA. This goes to the main calculation of salary of that person. So this is the discussion on HRA. Now let us move on to other topics like section 10 subsection 14. 1013A was the only exemption for HRA. 1014 is also exemption, but related to certain special allowances, basically to meet the personal expenses of employee or related to duties also. So there are certain exemptions here, but of course there is a rule 2B. You don't need to remember all the rules, not required. Section number at least you should remember. This is section 1014, exemption related to special allowances. Lot of allowances are there. For each of them, there is a provision within this section. So what are all those things? Various things are there under section 1014. This can be broadly categorized into, once again, further categories. First category we can say the special allowances are benefits. Of course, they are not perquisites. We are talking about money here. And why the allowances are given always? Generally to meet the expenses incurred. But the first category is those allowances which are given wholly necessarily and exclusively in the performance of duties of an office. So first category of these allowances 10.14.1 is allowances given to the employee, cash given to the employee, but for what purpose they are given? To meet some expenditure while performing the duties. In that case, what is the situation? How the exemptions will be? That is contained in 10.14.1. So here, these type of allowances, there is no limit on the amount which the employee can receive from the employer. However, whatever amount received should be fully utilized for the purpose for which it was given to him. If it is utilized, we cannot say there is a personal benefit coming to the employee because he is using it for office purposes. When he is using it for office purposes, that can be exempted only when if it is fully utilized for the purpose for which it is given to the employee. So that is one category of special allowances. We can call them allowances given to the employees to meet expenses in the performance of duties. Okay, that is first category. Second category is generally given to the employees for other than the office expenses. Means what? His personal expenses. Generally these are given to the employees in order to meet their personal expenses. But where they are given? They are given where he is performing the duties in order to compensate for the increased cost of living. If he shifts to some other place, then also such expenses, such allowances can be given. So those are special cases, but generally on a broader basis, we can understand this way. 10.14.1 talks about allowances given for the purpose of meeting official duties. Section 10.14.2 talks about allowances given which give some kind of personal benefit to the employee because they are generally used by the employee for personal purposes. But here exemption is not full. It is going to be only restricted to the limit which is prescribed in the law, and to that extent only it will be exempt, and the remaining amount naturally will be taxable. So any amount received by the employee in excess of the specified limits will be taxable in the hands of the employee as income. So that is the point here. But again, my main point here to note is it does not matter whether the amount which is received is actually spent or not by the employee. We don't care about that. Exemption is given according to whatever the law says. Actual expenditure incurred is more than the allowance given to the employee, doesn't matter. As actually the employee did not incur any expenditure, still that also doesn't matter. Whatever the exemption given by law, that will be passed on to the employee subject to limits prescribed under 10.14.2. So 10.14.1 is about special allowances given to employees for official purposes. 10.14.2 we can say special allowances given to the employees for personal purposes. That is a broad categorization. In the first category, if the employee really spends the money that he received for official purposes, there is no taxability if that amount is fully spent. That is the first category. There are no limits prescribed under the law. Whatever the amount given by employer, if the employee spends it, enough, exemption is granted. But in the second category, actual amount spent by employee is immaterial. Exemption will be given in accordance with the law. And we will see a lot of variety exemptions here, which are funny, but can't help it. That is what the law says. We cannot change that. At the maximum, we can only comment on them for understanding purposes. But still, that is of no use. Ultimately, law is what prevails in the computations. So Rule 2BB specifies certain things like these, which are all exempted for the purpose of 10.14.1. So always 10.14.1 means we have to keep in mind these allowances are broadly given generally for the purpose of meeting official obligations of employee. Employer is giving money to the employee for performing some official duties. So that is why these all exemptions or these all allowances will be given as exemption. These all exemptions will be granted on the basis of actual expenditure incurred by the employee. Why that is given, that will be told in the name itself. So you can just remember these names. One is traveling allowance. Once again, don't mix with the transport allowance, which was earlier discussed under fully taxable allowances. That was different. Transport allowance is different. That was for the purpose of commuting between office and residence. That was fully taxable for normal people, exempt for only handicapped people. But here we are not talking about that. We are talking about what? Traveling allowance. Traveling allowance is here given for what? To meet the cost of travel on tour or on transfer. So tour, why is he going? Employee is not going on a personal tour. He's not taking his family and going for a vacation. No, that is not what we are talking here. We are talking about tour means tour on official duties. Transfer naturally happens when a person is transferred from one city to another city. That will cost him. To meet such expenses, employer might give some allowance to the employee. Namesake, we can call it traveling allowance. But essence is what you should remember always, not the names only. Names can be deceiving sometimes. Essence is what? This allowance is given to the employee when the employee travels on a tour or because of a transfer. Popularly in the real world, this is called TA. TA, DA, these are called. One is traveling allowance, one is daily allowance. Popularly, these are called TA and DA. So, traveling allowance is given for cost of the travel on tour. Daily allowance is given, same. Once again, when the employee is on tour or is transferred for certain period to meet the ordinary daily expenses, that will be given by employer to employee. That is called daily allowance. So, traveling allowance purpose is different. That is cost of travel. Daily allowance purpose is different. That is to meet the daily expenses on tour. Imagine an employee is being transferred from one city to another city. In the new city, to settle down, it will take time for him now. So there he has to meet his daily expenses. Maybe he has to stay in a hotel or somewhere, daily food, etc. A lot of expenses will be there. In order to meet such expenses, daily allowance will be given. Or officially, if the employee is on travel related to a tour, that is official tour. Let us say an auditor goes from one city to another city. And we are talking about an employee auditor, not a practicing auditor. Internal auditor of a company, originally headquartered in Mumbai, goes for an internal audit in Kolkata. That is a tour. That's an official tour. And to travel, definitely this person will have to incur some expenses. That is the expenditure. In order to meet that expenditure, employer is giving allowance. That is traveling allowance. Once again, I'm repeating, the substance of what is happening is more important, not the names. So we have to be very clear. Are we talking about money that is given by employer to employee, or are we talking about air ticket or directly the bus ticket or train ticket given by employer to employee? If the second case, it is not an allowance. It will become a perquisite, and we are not talking about that. When allowance we are using the word, that means money. So employer gives some money to the employee to meet the cost of travel or to meet the cost of ordinary daily wages on tour, daily charges on tour or transfer. If that is the case, both of them are exempt. There is no limit here, no amounts mentioned anywhere in these provisions. But exempt when? When the employee really spends that. Let us say employer gave 10,000 rupees, employee spent 8,000 rupees only. Naturally, 2,000 becomes taxable. If employer gives 10,000 rupees, employee actually spends 12,000 rupees. Then you cannot say negative 2,000 is taxable. No, nothing like that. Exemption cannot exceed the actual amount received, never. So then the exemption will be full 10,000, nothing will be taxable in that case. So point here is, we need to check how much is the amount that is received and how much is the amount that is spent. In all cases, how much is taxable is the remaining. amount received minus amount spent. That becomes taxable. Of course, if the amount spent is more than amount received, nothing will be taxable. Exemption cannot be more than the amount that is received actually. So either this will be zero taxable or a positive amount if the spent amount is less than the received amount. If the spent amount, received amount are same, then nothing is taxable, zero taxable. If spent amount is less than amount received, then there will be something taxable, then that's a positive amount that is taxable. But there is no possibility of any time having a negative amount as taxable. No, there is nothing like that. So that is a point to be noted. Exemptions are given only to the extent of the amounts that are received. In no case, exemption can exceed the amount that is originally received. That's all. That logic has to be applied in all cases. So what are we talking about here is all the expenses which are incurred for official duties, in order to meet those expenses, the employer is giving some allowance to employee. It is exempt. To what extent it is exempt? To the extent it is actually spent, it is exempt. That's it. One of them is traveling allowance, one of them is daily allowance. Okay, that is related to TA and DA, we can say. Then there is one more thing, another thing that is also related to travel only, but within the city generally, that is conveyance allowance. This is also same. Once again, why this expenditure, why this allowance is given? In order to meet the expenditure incurred in conveyance in the performance of duties. So when the employee is traveling, in the performance of duties, whatever the traveling expenditure is there, that is called conveyance allowance. And when we use the word conveyance allowance, we have to understand it is an expenditure incurred by the employee in performance of his official duties only. And to what extent it could be exempt? Naturally, same thing. To the extent it is actually spent. So what you should remember is nature of these allowances, purpose for which these allowances are given, and of course whether the amount has been really spent for that purpose or not has to be checked. How do we know that? We cannot ask the employee. So that should be given in the question. So what if it is not given in the question? Then assume that it has been spent for the purpose of whatever the official duties done by the employee, then give full exemption. That is the best treatment if nothing is mentioned about them. So traveling allowance, daily allowance or conveyance allowance, you can give exemption if no information is there, but you have to write an assumption. It has been assumed that the employee has spent the so and so allowance for the purpose of official duties. That's it. If that happens, entire amount, whatever that amount may be, no limit on the amounts, entire amount will be exempt. If, for example, the amount spent is less than the amount received, then there will be some amount which becomes taxable. These are the various types of allowances. Common point, if you remember, you can easily understand each of them has the same thread. What is the common point here? These are all given for performing official duties, not for personal purposes. Employee is not enjoying this money for his personal purposes. He is using this money for performing his official duties, which is required. That is why employer is giving the employee some money to meet those expenses. That's it. That is TA, DA and conveyance allowance. TA generally is given for going little far places, like a out of station, let us say. Transfer definitely means out of station. So that is TA. Conveyance allowance is generally for traveling within the place, in the same place of employment, but again not for personal purposes, for official duties. This is common for many employees to get that. So that is conveyance allowance is also part of the taxable allowances if the amount is not spent fully. If it is spent fully, it is fully exempt. That's all. Like this, there are other allowances also, like helper allowance, for example. So helper, well, natural name itself indicates. But where the helper is engaged, helper allowance, don't think that it is servant allowance. No. Servant allowance is different. Helper allowance is different. Helper here is where? Engaged in the performance of duties. Helper is in the office, not at home. For example, an employee may have a facility of recruiting his own personal assistant or recruiting his own office boy who will be acting or aiding or helping him in the performance of his duties. In order to, the helper may not be in the roles of the company, but the company directly gives some money to the employee. In turn, the employee can give to his own helper. But that helper, whoever he may be, that should be recruited. The helper should be doing actually official duties once again. That is a common point. So performance of duties while doing that, if any helper is appointed and that helper's salary is paid by employee and employer is not bothered about who is this helper and all, employer simply is giving some fixed standard amount of helper allowance to employee. If the employee really spends the entire amount of money in paying to the helper whom he has appointed, then entire amount is exempt. If not, if it is short spent, then the remaining amount becomes taxable. But point to be noted here, once again, helper here we are not talking about as servant. Helper allowance is different, servant allowance is different. Servant generally when we say, that is in the house. Like that earlier we have some taxable allowances. Don't mix them up. Understand the difference very clearly. Fully taxable allowances are there where various allowances are there here. For example, servant allowance is fully taxable. Why? That is personal purposes. Servant is different. Same way warden allowance, maid allowance, servant allowance, whatever names told. Maybe to look after the children of the employee, maybe he has a ayah at home, a maid at home. Doesn't matter. That can be called a warden or a proctor, whatever. All those things are taxable fully. No exemption. 1014(1) will not apply to them. Why? Because those are all allowances of personal nature and those are not exempt specifically under 1014. That means they are fully taxable. That is why those are all in the list of fully taxable allowances. But this is different. 1014(1) what we are talking about are not fully taxable list. These are partly exempt, partly taxable. Depends upon the facts. So sometimes there may be nothing taxable. Depending upon the situation, there may be some amount which is taxable. But common point here under 1014(1) is all these allowances are given, granted for the purpose of meeting official expenses. So that is traveling allowance, daily allowance, conveyance allowance, helper allowance, like that, some other names like research allowance. Why? Employee wants to do some research. He wants to go for further studies and all. Whatever it is. Maybe training he wants to get somewhere. No problem. In any other educational or research institutions, if the employee's educational and research pursuits are helped by employer by giving him a research allowance, that is also fully exempt when? If it is fully spent for that purpose. Employee takes research allowance but uses to buy a bike. No. Then this allowance will not be exempt. So if it is used for the particular purpose by the employee, then exemption is granted for that also. Same way uniform allowance. Self-explanatory. Uniform allowance means which is given to meet the purchase or maintenance of uniform. If employer gives uniform allowance to employee and employee really spends on the uniform, that money, then that is exempt. So these are all various cases. All these cases, you need to remember each of them, the names wise. TA, DA, traveling allowance, daily allowance, conveyance allowance, helper allowance, research allowance and uniform allowance. These are all the allowances which are exempt to the extent they are spent. Then naturally we may get a doubt. Sir, how do we know in reality that these amounts are actually spent? Nobody knows. Definitely there has to be a proof given by the SASI that he has actually spent. Some bills have to be produced, some expenditure actually spent. Proof has to be produced by the SASI if asked for. But in reality what happens? Nobody cares about all this. If such allowances are given, generally it is all deemed to be spent by the employee. But you cannot write this. This is not law. Law is telling whatever you received minus whatever you spent, that is taxable. And I will give you exemption only if it is spent, that too spent for that particular purpose. Exemption is given by law under 1014(1). So now burden of proof is on whom to claim exemption. If the SSC wants to claim this exemption, the burden of proof will be on the SSC. He has to prove that he has really spent it. So you and I don't have to worry how do they prove it and all, that they will take care of it. But our job is, in the problems that are given to us, we can identify these names, any of these names. Then we have to always be alert that it is falling under 1014(1), which means it should be for official duties, which means exemption is granted to the extent of the amount which is actually spent by the employee for the purpose for which the allowance is given. Then 1014(2) comes, which is a separate situation. Here limits are there. 1014(1) has no limits, as we have just discussed. 1014(2) is about allowances which are also given, but in general these allowances are all special allowances, usually for some other purpose. The purpose is not necessarily official. Employer is giving some allowances. Again, once again, we don't need to really worry about purpose as far as 1014(2) is concerned. Why? Anyway, actual amount spent is irrelevant, right? So who cares about the purpose? Why is it given? Is it spent or not? How much is spent? All those becomes irrelevant. So forget about purpose. Here what is important is names. Understand the difference. Earlier I was telling names are not that important. Names are important, definitely to be remembered. We need to remember these names. But purpose is important there. We need to understand the meaning of it. Servant allowance is a different meaning. Helper allowance is a different meaning. That we should understand. Conveyance allowance is a different meaning. Transport allowance is a different meaning. Traveling allowance is having a different meaning. So we need to understand that. So purpose of allowance is important in the earlier cases, whether it is fully taxable allowances or partly taxable allowances or partly exempt allowances according to 1014(1), this category, where generally the expenses are incurred for official purposes. But when it comes to 1014(2), actually we don't need to worry about anything that is actually the purpose of it. Why is it given? Is it spent? All those things are immaterial. We don't need to care about it. All that we need to do is just remember the name of the allowance and exemption of the allowance. That is one point. And second point is there are so many of them in this list. So many of them are there. Sir, are we going to remember all of them? Should we remember all of them? Is it going to be important to remember all of them? Once again, answer is no. So I would say some of them only are enough to be remembered, because some of them are not possible to be remembered also. That is why they may not be relevant for exam purposes. But the law is not made for exam. Law is for everybody. So look at the first one. Just for general knowledge, you can look at it, but don't remember that. First one, special compensatory allowance. Name of that is called special compensatory hilly area allowance, where the employee is working in high altitude, where uncongenial climate is there, because of which uncongenial climate allowance is given. Snowbound area allowance like that, avalanche allowance like that is given. Names itself you can understand to whom these are given. Generally to the people who are working in army. Those are the people, right, who will be staying in those high altitudes. For them, if any allowance is given, 800 rupees or 300 rupees depending upon the specified location. So are we going to go and check the specified locations now? Can we do that? Not possible. So what we do? We just ignore it. It's not possible to identify how much allowance is exempt. So what we have to know here under 1014(2) is how much of the allowance is exempt. That is standard given in the law. So we cannot remember, depending upon height this will be exempt. Lower height 300, little bit more height, more amount 500, like that, little bit more height, topmost 800. What is this? We cannot measure the height of the mountains on which the SCs are residing. Not possible, and that is completely irrelevant and ridiculous also to expect anything from this allowance in the examination. Only for one thing it is fixed, that is 7,000 rupees exemption per month, Siachen area of Jammu and Kashmir, because that is a very highest possible location, high altitude location. Who will be in Siachen? Normal employees will be there in Siachen. Nobody will be there. Only army will be there in Siachen. So if they get it, they will get exemption of this much amount. and they are anyway government employees, so we don't need to worry about them. So our normal SSC generally will be a private sector employee. Generally, there's no rule like that. We are not framing the questions, but there should be a common sense in framing the questions also, right? So government employees are not going to be our SSCs as far as problems are concerned. And private employees will not be in the high altitude. So we don't need to worry about the first one. I suggest to leave it. If at all you are interested in Siachen, remember 7,000 rupees per month. That is the only thing you can remember. 300, 800, you don't know. That depends upon the altitude of the hill, and we don't care about those things. Just ignore it. Same thing next one also. Too much of possibilities are there. And to whom they are given, you can read, you can understand easily. Special compensatory allowance. Why? Border area allowance, remote locality allowance, difficult area allowance, disturbed area allowance, like this. 1300, 1100, 1050, 750, 300, like that. Depending upon location, there are different exemptions. So are we going to by heart all the locations and respective exemptions to that? Absolutely not. So the first point, ignore it. Second point, ignore it. It is not useful for our exams. Really, there will be some people definitely who are receiving this allowance also, who are getting this exemption also. But they will not be our SSCs, is our general understanding. So, no need to remember this second point also. Just forget about it. But from the names, you can easily identify. These are also given for whom? Either police or military. Only for them. Who will be given this disturbed area allowance? Why? Difficult area. All these things are generally for law and order maintenance. So if at all they get any allowances like that, they can claim exemption under 1014(2). So let us leave it to them. We don't have to worry about that now as far as examination is concerned. And other things like tribal areas. This is only one. So if you want, you can remember. There is no range. First allowance, second allowance, why we could not remember is range is there. 300 to 800. Here also so many options are there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 options are there. We cannot remember each of them. Not required also. So just forget about them. Tribal area allowance, yes. We can call this tribal area allowance simply. Tribal area allowance exemption is how much? 200 rupees per month. That's it. That is the amount of exemption. How much they are receiving, we don't know. That will be given in the question. How much the SC is receiving, we don't know. Whatever the amount the SC receives, exemption is given 200 rupees per month. Just for example, understanding, if the SSC receives 500 rupees per month as a tribal area allowance, 200 per month will be exempt, 300 per month will be taxable. Multiply with 12, 3,600 will be included in the income of the SSC. So like that, exemption amounts are fixed here. Sir, why is it given? What they are spending with that? We don't care. That is absolutely none of our business. We just need to know the name of it and amount. Name, amount, name, amount. That's it. So what is the name here? We are talking about. We can call this as tribal area allowance. That is a better name for this. So many names are there, but generally we can call this tribal area allowance. That's it. That is 200 rupees per month. Then let us go to next one, fourth one. This is important. This will be definitely there in exams. Either MCQ definitely can be expected. Any allowance granted to an employee working in any transport system. So this is a fourth point, is not applicable to anybody. Only which employee? Employee who is working in any transport system. Means what? Could be anything. Could be bus drivers, bus conductors, railway TCs. So those people working in the bus travel, train travel, even air travel, like pilots, air hostesses, ground staff, who are cabin crew, all those people are part of this. So for them, who are all working in the transport system, some allowance is given. And why that allowance is given generally? Why that is given? To meet the personal expenditure during the duties performed in the course of running such transport from one place to another. And most important thing is, provided such employee is not in receipt of daily allowance. So already we have a daily allowance here. Both it is also of similar nature, where to meet the day-to-day expenditure of employee, some allowance is given. If that is given, anyway that is exempt. So if that is also given, this is also given, then this exemption will not apply. So this exemption will be applicable only conditionally when, if the employee is not in receipt of daily allowance, but he receives some allowance, whatever name it is called, And who is the employee? Not everybody. Not everybody. Here, the employee is only the one who is working in any transport system. And why it is given? Generally for the same purpose, because for example, airport staff or airport staff will be grounded. Let us say the pilots of the aircraft and the cabin crew members, they travel a lot. If you even take international travel also, so they will go from one place to another place and they stay there for a couple of days, and they will have some expenses there, no? Personal expenses, eating food outside and all, so those things will be there. For the purpose of that, this allowance is given. But really, do we care whether they are spending it? No. We have to always remember that. 10.14.2, we don't care about actual spending. Actually, that person may be not spending 1 rupee also in that. We don't care. Allowance is given, exemption exactly like this, without looking at how much is the actual expenditure. Actual expenditure is immaterial for the purpose of 10.14.2. So why we are knowing it? Generally to understand this type of allowance is given to transport employees for that purpose. That's all. Other than this, no need to give too much of focus to this area of why is it given and all. But to whom it is given, that matters. To whom this is given, exemption is given only if the allowance was given to any person working in the transport system. We can call them transport employees simply for all this story. Transport employees receiving some allowance. If that is there, how much is the exemption? Exemption is 70% of such allowance up to a maximum of 10,000 rupees per month. You can look at the difference here suddenly. Normally we are talking 200 rupees like that, 750 rupees. Now suddenly 10,000 rupees per month exemption we are talking. That too, huge exemption. Why? Naturally, to cover the airline sector also. Airline sector generally will have definitely high allowances for this purpose. So in order to help them, in order to give some good exemption to them, exemption maximum amount is 10,000 rupees per month. But don't think directly 10,000 will be given as exemption. 70% of such allowance only is exempt. 10,000 is the upper limit, not an automatic exemption. What is the limit here? 70% of such allowance. Just for clarity purposes, once again, take some examples. Say for example, if an employee receives, first case, 3,500 rupees. 3,500 rupees if he is receiving per month, let us say. How much will be exempt? People will think 3,500 is exempt because it is less than 10,000. No, sir. 3,500 is not exempt. Only 70% of that is exempt, which means only 2,450 is exempt. Remaining becomes taxable. That becomes taxable. So understand the difference. Same way, if the employee receives 10,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees as allowance, which employee? Transport employee. How much will be exempt? Entire 10,000 exempt? No. No. Maximum of 10,000 is the exemption, but basically the exemption is how much? This is what important point is to be noted. Basically the exemption is only 70% of such allowance. So 10,000, 70% of that means what? 70% of that will be definitely 7,000 rupees. So in the 10,000, only 70% will be exempt. So that means 7,000 is exempt, means how much will be taxable? 3,000 will be still taxable. So that is another point to be noted. So I think this is 7,000 rupees only is exempt, 70% only. Like for example, just another example. We'll say 15,000 per month if an employee is receiving who is working in transport sector, then how much will be exempt? 70% of that comes to 10,500, but can we give 10,500 exemption? No. Then the 10,000 comes. So maximum exemption is restricted to 10,000. So remaining amount 5,000 will be taxable. Like that, if an employee receives 20,000 rupees as a allowance here, if at all, then how much will be exempt? Maximum, once again, 10,000 rupees only will be exempt, even though 70% of 20,000 is 14,000. You cannot get 14,000 exemption. You can get only 10,000 exemption. So this 10,000 is a maximum exemption. Don't think that that is a flat amount, or don't even think that Below that entire allowance is exempt. No, always the point to be remembered here is the 70% of such allowance is only exempt. That's it. Whatever the amount may be, 70% of such allowance only is exempt. Of course, the exemption cannot exceed 10,000 rupees per month. This is a very important point. For point number 4, we can call this allowance given to the transport sector employees for meeting expenditure when they are on their duties. Because they are already in transport sector, they keep on traveling, and in the travel definitely they get some expenditure, and they are not receiving daily allowance. Then 70% of such allowance up to 10,000 rupees per month maximum can be given as exemption. That's it. That is point number 4 to be remembered. Tribal area allowance, since it is only one, you can remember. Allowance to transport employees, you should remember 70% or 10,000 rupees. You can say whichever is lower will be given as exemption. So whichever is lower is given as exemption, 70% of the allowance or 10,000 rupees, whichever is lower. Then point number 5, children education allowance. So this is the comedy. Exemption is only 100 rupees per month per child, up to a maximum of 2 children only. So up to a maximum of 2 children, we can understand this was there since a long time for family planning purposes to discourage people from having many children. So that is okay. Reasons we don't need, but definitely this exemption is given maximum up to 2 children only. But how much is the exemption? That is important. You should remember that. That is how much? That is 100 rupees per month per child. 100 rupees per month per child, that is. So if an employee has 2 children, 200 rupees per month can be claimed as exemption for the purpose of education of the children. That is the biggest comedy. Nowadays, with this 100 rupees per month exemption, the government is giving very liberally. The children may be completing that 100 rupees in a few days only. So this allowance is given by employers to employees or not, that is their choice. But government giving exemption through this section 1014(2), only an amount of 100 rupees per month per child. Very ridiculous amount, low amount, and it is there since long time. They are not revising it because nobody asked them, nobody cares about this. So it has stayed at the same level. So whether we like it or not, we have to remember this number. Exemption of children education allowance is only 100 rupees per month per child, up to a maximum of 2 children. And for the same thing, for the children only, hostel expenditure, hostel allowance you can call it, that is given exemption up to 300 rupees per month per child, up to a maximum of 2 children. That's it. Education allowance is up to 100 rupees per month per child, whereas hostel expenditure allowance is 300 rupees per month per child, up to a maximum of 2 children. That is the amount of exemption granted by law, 100 rupees and 300 rupees for the purpose of children education allowance and children hostel allowance. Once again, 300 rupees per month, how it will be enough for hostel, that only lawmakers can tell us. But we cannot change that. We can only think that these are very small amounts of exemption. Government is definitely not so liberal with these numbers. They could have made some reasonable numbers. Even when you talk about airport staff, aircraft staff and all, 10,000 per month looks very good. That is a practically feasible number. 10,000 per month is okay for expenses, even for a pilot also. When they are on the outside, some out of station, that is okay, understandable. 10,000, we can support that number. 200 and other things we don't have to comment because that is completely government and their own employees, so it is between them. So we don't have to enter in between them. But look at this 100 and 300, these are ridiculous amounts. So children education definitely is much costlier than this, and hostels are definitely much costlier than this. So the exemption given is not really sufficient. But once again, we cannot help it. We just need to remember what the law says, that's all. We may comment it, we may not like it, but that is all secondary. But the primary thing is we should remember that this is the amount of exemption given to these type of allowances. That's it. Once again, these are all 7 and 8 not required. So 6th is okay. So third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. These things you can remember. Once again, these things, other things are not required. Compensatory field area allowance. There are specified areas in specified states. So are you going to by heart, what are those specified states and all now? That doesn't make sense. So no need of remembering this 2600. Compensatory modified field area allowance. Once again, some areas in some states that too modified. All these things are for military people. So we don't need to worry about these allowances. Not required to be remembered. In general, these are all once again for police and military type of employees. So exemptions are given for them when they are on the field area allowance, that is called. There is a exemption of this much for them, which we don't need for our problem solving purposes. And counter-insurgency allowance also. Insurgency itself is like terrorists coming from outside India to India. So armed forces we are talking. Once again, military. So all these things are police military related allowances. We don't need them. Our SSC normally in our exam questions is not going to be a military officer, not going to be police. So that much we can safely assume. So not required generally to remember that. This is to be remembered transport allowance, which we already discussed. That we discussed. Transport allowance. What is this transport allowance? Mainly, point is to understand why this is given to meet the expenditure of commuting between residence and office. Residence and office commuting transport allowance. Where we discussed it when it is fully taxable. Then why is it coming once again here in the exemptions? Exemption is there. 3,200 up to 3,200 rupees per month for whom? Not for everybody, only for handicapped employees. So if at all the employee is handicapped and is receiving a transport allowance to meet the expenditure of commuting between office and residence, then an exemption of up to 3,200 per month can be given to that employee only. If nothing is mentioned in the question, don't assume that the employee is handicapped. For a normal employee, this allowance is fully taxable. It is in the exemption list only and only for handicapped employees. So, especially there is a 3,200 rupees exemption for them. That should be remembered because there is a number attached to that and conditions are very clear. To whom it is given? Handicapped employees. Why is it given? To meet the expenditure of commuting, means traveling once again, between office and residence. That's it. So this is common. So for anybody this can be applicable. So this is important to be remembered. Once again, you may remember this underground allowance because there is only one number. And this is given underground. How many people will work normally? Very rare, no? But still, there will be people in the mines. They are working like Singareni collieries and all. Those who are working underground, they may get underground allowance, whatever it is. If there is a question of underground allowance, exemption is 800 per month. So you should remember this, if at all, side things. Main things are only these. Point number 4, 5, 6. Those are main, which are useful in calculations for our examination. But in addition to that, tribal area allowance is 200 per month. You can remember that. In addition to that, you can remember transport allowance 3,200 per month, subject to conditions of the employee being handicapped. Underground allowance exemption is 800 per month up to for people who are working underground. So these are generally additional things you can remember. But those which are not at all required to be remembered are 7, 8, 9 points. Same way first and second points also not required to be remembered because all of them, if you observe closely, are related to either military or police, which generally is not going to be our subject matter. So 12th point is underground allowance exemption is 800 per month. And 13th one also you cannot remember all these things. High altitudes, depending upon the height, there is exemption. So altitude of 9,000 to 15,000 feet, exemption is 1,060 per month. Above 15,000 feet, exemption is 1,600 per month. If at all, the paper setter really wants to create a tough situation to the students, then this may be asked, otherwise normally not possible. But still, just for the sake of conservatism, you may remember this. Two different exemptions, 1,060 rupees per month if the, what is the allowance we are talking? High altitude allowance. Of course, to the armed forces only this also, 99%, 99.99% it will not be asked. But just in case if it is asked, there are only two categories, unlike earlier. Earlier there are so many categories, so those things are not necessary to be remembered. Here, only two categories, height and amount. 9,000 to 15,000 feet, 1,060 per month. Above 15,000 feet, 1,600 per month. You may remember this if you can. Otherwise, you ignore it also, no problem. And next one also I think can be ignored. This is also same, armed forces. Special compensatory, highly active field area allowance. If any more words can be added there, we'll be happy. Amount is 4,200 per month. So, generally not possible unless a statistic paper setter sets the paper. These things are generally not required to be remembered. The same way, island duty allowance granted to the member of armed forces in the Andaman, Nicobar and Lakshadweep group of islands. For them, 3,250 per month. So generally not possible, but because there is a special area here, it's not extended to the entire place. Only Andaman, Nicobar, Lakshadweep island allowance we can call it, or island duty allowance we can call it. The exemption is 3,250 per month. If you can remember that also. So yeah, there are some allowances which are not so important, but it is about your capacity to remember them. But what are the things to be definitely remembered are these three, I would say. Only three in this big list. One is the allowance given to the transport sector employee. Second one is children education allowance. Third one is children hostel expenditure allowance. These three are must. Second category, you can remember, you try to remember tribal area allowance, 200 per month. Same way, transport allowance to handicapped employees, 3,200 per month. Underground allowance, 800 per month. That is second category. All the third category is armed forces and all. We don't need to remember that. But if at all we want to remember, particular things are given. So, Siachen, the word Siachen, if it is there, then there is an exemption of 7,000 rupees per month for a special compensatory allowance it is. Others 800, 300, that you cannot remember. That depends upon the locations, you cannot remember those locations. Just one location, Siachen, 7,000 per month. Again, this you cannot remember, so don't even think about second point. Other things you can if you want. Compensatory field area, compensatory modified field area, counterinsurgency, those are all your capacity. You can remember them if you want. Same way with the feet altitude changes, then high altitude allowance also exemption changes. Somewhere between 9,000 to 15,000 feet if the employees are working. Then 1,060 per month is exemption. Above 15,000 feet, 1,600 per month is the exemption. Like that, Andaman Nicobar, if you see suddenly, you can remember 3,250 per month is the exemption for island allowance. That to armed forces. See, wherever armed forces is there, possibility of that to be asked in the question is very, very less. But according to your level of conservatism, if you want to remember them, you can remember them. There is nothing special to understand in that. All that you need to remember is name and amount. Name and amount. But you better write these things on paper, then you will be able to remember these things well. Okay. So what are the things you have to write? You have to write separately what are all fully taxable allowances which we have discussed earlier. You should write them on paper. So first category, fully taxable allowances. What are all those? This list is there. Fully taxable allowances, 13 items are there. You write all of them and remember those names. HRA anyway, you can write the core provision, how the exemption is calculated. Then 1014.1, you can write the list of only names at least enough. Traveling allowance, daily allowance, conveyance allowance, helper allowance, research allowance, uniform allowance. You can write those names and remember those names. But main thing is you have to also understand why they are given. Name itself indicates mostly, but you should understand the essence of that. But then 1014.2, it is about not just names. In the earlier two categories, only names are enough, and understanding the purpose is enough. But now purpose is not required. Name is enough, but the amount is required here in 1014.2. Here you need to remember the name of the allowance and amount. Name, amount, like that. So that is 1014.2 and 1014.1, we can say. These are the various allowances and their exemptions. With that, we can conclude the allowances portion of this chapter, salaries. And I'm just reminding you how many broad categories or portions are there in this chapter are three. One is allowances, 2 is perquisites, 3 is retirement benefits. Out of them, one portion we have completed, that is allowances, consisting of 1013A and 1014.1 and 1014.2. That's it. There is some question here which is given. Generally, you can go through that. Srikanth has 2 sons and is in receipt of children education allowance of 150 rupees per month for his elder son and 70 rupees per month for his younger son. Both his sons are going to school and he also receives the following allowances. Transport allowance 1800 per month, tribal area allowance 500 per month. So compute his taxable allowances he is asking. So one by one you can take it. First, children education allowance. So what the mistake sometimes people might do is they will do 150 plus 70, 220. In that 200 is exempt because 2 children he has. No, not like that. It has to be calculated child wise. For that purpose, this question is given. MCQ type of question can be asked like this. Exemption has to be given child wise. So first elder son, 150 per month if the allowance is given for him, not to him, for him. 100 rupees is exempt. So 50 per month is taxable. So 50 into 12, that is 600 rupees is taxable in respect of the education allowance received for the elder son of the SSE. Then what about the younger son? 70 rupees per month allowance he is receiving, not the younger son. Srikanth is receiving. Because it is not more than 100 rupees per month, the entire amount is exempt. Up to 100 rupees, nothing is taxable. So entire amount is exempt. So finally, taxable children education allowance comes to how much? 600 rupees. I am also telling the wrong calculation what people will do. People might think 150 plus 70, 220 minus 200, 20, 20 into 12, 240. Instead of 600, they might write 240. It will be there in the options. If it is given as MCQ, people think 240 is correct answer. No, it is not. The exemption of 100 rupees per month per child has to be calculated child wise, not on the total number of children. That has to be observed in this question. Then what about transport allowance? Transport allowance is fully taxable, we know that. Fully taxable. And we cannot assume Srikanth is handicapped and all. So completely taxable. Amount is 21,600. Tribal area allowance 500 per month, he has received it, but we know how much is exempt. Exemption is 200 per month. That means taxable is 300 per month, which means 3,600 per annum. So the total of all these taxable allowances comes down to 25,800 rupees. That's it. That is how exemptions can be calculated. Depending upon information given in the question, you should remember the exemptions under 1014.2. The amounts you have to remember. So using those exemptions, we can find out how much is taxable portion of the income that is earned by the SSE. In this case, it was 25,800 rupees. That is one of the practice questions we can say. And other category of allowances, already we just touched it enough, no need to go into details of that. Allowances which are fully exempt, allowances given to High Court judges, allowances given to United Nations officers, United Nations officials, and somebody compensatory allowance received to the, once again, received by judge also. Sumptuary allowance, whatever it is, given to High Court and Supreme Court judges also. So all these things are exempt. Supreme Court judges, High Court judges, these type of allowances which are all given to them, those are all fully exempt, so nothing to calculate. You don't even expect any question on that because there is nothing to calculate. And this one we know 10.7 separately. Allowances are perquisites paid or allowed to an Indian citizen outside India by the government for the services rendered outside India is exempt from tax. We know that. However, also just to remind you, the base salary received by them would be taxable because that is deemed to accrue or arise in India. What is exempt is only allowances and perquisites. That is 10.7, which we already know that. Same way, certain things are exempted for these people, allowances and perquisites paid to chairman or retired chairman or member or retired member of UPSC, Union Public Service Commission, UPSC, chairman or member. Not only existing chairman member, even retired chairman, retired member. For them, certain allowances and perquisites are exempt. Once again, we are not going to have UPSC chairman or member as our SSE in the examination questions, so don't worry about it. But you just generally remember that if there are any allowances or any perquisites given to them, any house given to them, car given to them, all of them are exempt. So that is another, I think, the way of Guru Dakshina that our Babus, IAS officers have given to their recruiters, because who will draft these laws? Who drafts the income tax law? Who will draft this exemption? Definitely IAS people only. So they have given exemption to their own people who recruited them, who recruits the IAS, IPS, etc., UPSC. So for the member and chairman, to that extent we can understand. Even retired member, retired chairman also, they give exemption to themselves. Can't help it. Let them take it, let them enjoy it. We don't have to worry about it, because there is no calculation involved in that. Simply, those are exempt. So in case of retired chairman or member, or current chairman or member of the UPSC, that's it. Of course, there is a point of exemption clarification given in relation to this UPSC people. Retired chairman and retired members only. For normal current chairman, current members, everything is exempt. For retired chairman and retired members, there is a limit that is given, like maximum of 14,000 per month can be given for meeting expenses towards secretarial assistance. Same way, phone calls, free calls also up to 1,500 per month. Nowadays it is outdated anyway, but still those are all exempt. For UPSC, retired chairman and retired members, no need of remembering it specially. But particularly for MCQs, retired chairman and retired members only, you can remember this 14,000 per month as exemption, right? So that is about special case, not a normal SSC. We don't need to really worry about that much. On a general note, yes, we can have an idea that there are a lot of exemptions to them. And not only that, there are so many other people like Chief Election Commissioner, judges of Supreme Court, blah, blah, blah. Those are all exemptions given to them. So anyway, exemptions are there, means there is nothing for us to calculate. Don't worry about that. You should worry about this actually, 1014.1 and 1014.2, the names of them, amounts, how much are exempt, to 1013A, how to calculate HRA exemption. These are the things we should worry about as far as examination problems are concerned. And what are all the fully taxable allowances? We should remember those names of them. So these are all the various things that we should definitely remember and apply in the problems according to the information that is given in the problem. Okay, with that we can conclude the segment of allowances, and we'll continue this discussion in the next session with one more segment of this chapter, salaries. Till the time, take care. Bye bye. Thank you very much.